By late 1977, the Rhodesian Bush War had reached a breaking point. The Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, ZANLA, under the political leadership of Robert Mugabe and the military command of Josiah Tangagara, had moved its operational headquarters across the border into Mozambique. The new sanctuary was called Chimoio. To call it a camp is to understate it. Chimoio was a guerrilla city. Spread across a triangular complex roughly 25 kilometers wide, Chimoio contained the Chitpo College for Political Instruction, Takawira Base 1 and 2, Passachiger Camp for new recruits, Percy Ntini Camp for armory and stores, Headquarters Camp for the senior command, and a fortified parade ground large enough to assemble several thousand fighters at once. Rhodesian Special Branch Intelligence, corroborated by aerial reconnaissance flown by squadron leader Vic Whiteman and refined by Cella Scout pseudo-operations, placed the population at between 9 and 11,000 people. Of those, approximately 4,000 were trained combatants. Anti-aircraft positions, including ZPU-2 14.5mm guns and Strela-2 shoulder-launched missiles, ringed the perimeter. Across the border, the man tasked with destroying this complex was Lieutenant Colonel Brian Robinson, commanding officer of C Squadron, Rhodesian Special Air Service. The Rhodesian SAS at full strength was barely 200 men. For the Chimoio raid, Robinson could field 88 troopers from his own squadron, augmented by 97 men of the Rhodesian Light Infantry Support Commando under Major Brian Snyman. The total ground force, 185 men, would attack a base of 4,000 armed enemy at a ratio of more than 20-1. The air commander, Group Captain Norman Walsh, would orchestrate every Hawker Hunter, Canberra bomber, Vampire fighter bomber, and Alawet III helicopter the Rhodesian Air Force could put into the sky. There were no reserves. There was no second wave. If the assault force was pinned down in Mozambique, there would be no one to rescue them. The plan was codenamed Operation Dingo, and every officer in the briefing room at New Sarum Air Base knew the math did not work. Here is what the history books leave out. The entire operation hinged on a single piece of human behavior, the ZANLA morning parade. Cella Scouts intelligence, gathered through captured guerrillas and clandestine reconnaissance, had established that every morning at exactly 8 o'clock, the population of Chimoio assembled in the open. Political instruction, roll call, weapons inspection. 4,000 fighters standing shoulder to shoulder in the open ground. If Norman Walsh could put bombs on that parade ground at the exact minute the assembly formed, the war could change in 90 seconds. The risk was breathtaking. A timing error of 5 minutes meant empty ground and a fully alerted enemy. A weather delay meant catastrophe. A leaked plan meant the death of every man in the assault force. At 7:38 hours on November 23, 1977, a captured Douglas DC-7 flew low over Chimoio, carrying a Rhodesian electronic warfare specialist who broadcast a deception transmission, impersonating a routine civilian flight. ZANLA's Air Watch stood down. Behind that aircraft, hidden by altitude and the rising sun, came 4 Canberra bombers of No. 5 Squadron, 8 Hawker Hunters of No. 1 Squadron, and 12 Alawet III helicopters of 7 Squadron, 6 of them gunships, 6 of them carrying troops. Trailing behind, 3 Dakota DC-3 transports carried 48 paratroopers of the SAS, ready to drop directly onto the eastern stop line. At 7:58 hours, the first Canberra rolled in at treetop height. Each aircraft dropped 300 Alpha bombs, Rhodesian-designed bouncing fragmentation munitions that detonated above ground for maximum lethal coverage. 300 bombs per aircraft, 4 aircraft, 1,200 bombs walking across the parade ground in a single coordinated pass. The Hunters came in behind the Canberras with Matra rocket pods and Franton napalm. The Alawet gunships, each armed with a 20mm MG-151 cannon, peeled off to engage the anti-aircraft positions that had begun, far too late, to return fire. Within minutes, 3 of the 4 ZPU-2 positions were silenced. The Strela teams never got a missile into the air, and then the parachutes opened. Major Brian Robinson jumped from the lead Dakota at 350 feet. Beside him dropped the men of a troop, C Squadron, among them Captain Bob McKenna, Lieutenant Richard Stannard, and a young trooper named Carl Lunt who would later write the operation's most cited first-hand account. They landed in tall elephant grass east of the camp, formed up in under 4 minutes, and began sweeping west into a base that was on fire and screaming. Here is the moment that shocked even Tangagara's senior commanders. The SAS did not advance in textbook extended line. Robinson, breaking from established doctrine, ordered his men forward in small 4-man sticks operating in independent sectors, each stick free to assault any building, bunker, or trench it encountered. The tactic forced ZANLA to fight in every direction at once. A defending force that outnumbered the attackers 20-1 could not concentrate against a single point because there was no single point. This was the turning point of the entire battle. And it would soon become the new turning point of the entire war. If this is landing, save this video. You will want to come back to this one. By 8:30 hours, less than 45 minutes after the first bomb fell, Chimoio's central headquarters complex was in Rhodesian hands. But the operation was not yet half complete. The helicopter landing zone designated HLZ-1 had inserted Major Snyman's support commando of the Rhodesian light infantry on the southern flank. Snyman's task was to form a blocking position along the Pungwe River and engage any fighters attempting to escape southward. Within the first hour, the RLI killed an estimated 300 ZANLA combatants attempting to break out through the riverine bush. Their MAG general-purpose machine guns, firing belt after belt from prepared positions, turned the riverbank into what one Rhodesian later described in his after-action report only as a place I will not describe to my children. Inside the main camp, the SAS sticks were uncovering documents that would reshape Rhodesian intelligence for the rest of the war. Captain Scotty McCormack's stick captured Tongagara's personal field safe, containing operational orders, training schedules, and the identities of dozens of ZANLA officers operating inside Rhodesia under aliases. Trooper Frank Booth's stick overran the radio building, capturing intact ciphers that would feed Rhodesian signals intelligence for the next 18 months. Lieutenant Stannard personally cleared the armory at Percy and Tinney Camp, capturing or destroying RPG-7 rocket launchers, PKM machine guns, hundreds of AK-47 rifles, and crates of Soviet-supplied TM-46 anti-tank mines. And then, at 1100 hours, Norman Walsh and his command, Alawet, spotted what every Rhodesian had feared. A column of approximately 300 fighters, well-armed and moving in disciplined formation, had broken out of the northern complex and was advancing towards Snyman's blocking position from an unexpected direction. If they reached the helicopter landing zones, the extraction would become a massacre. Walsh made the call that defined the battle. He pulled both gunship sections off close support, vectored the 4 Canberras for a second bombing run, and committed his last airborne reserve, a single Lynx light attack aircraft flown by Air Lieutenant Kevin Pink, to mark the target with white phosphorus. The Canberras released over the breakout column at 11:17 hours. When the smoke cleared, the column had simply ceased to exist. By dusk, with light failing and the helicopters running on fumes, Robinson made the call to begin the extraction. Each Alawet could carry 4 troopers. With 12 helicopters running a shuttle to a refuel point inside the Mozambican border, the entire ground force had to be lifted out before darkness made navigation impossible. The last stick of the SAS, commanded by Captain Bob McKenna, was extracted from a clearing east of the burning headquarters complex at 18:04 hours. Behind them, the largest guerrilla base in southern Africa was a smoking ruin. But that was only the opening move of Operation Dingo. What happened over the next 48 hours defied every rule of warfare. While Chimoio burned, the second phase of Operation Dingo was already in motion. On November 25th, less than 48 hours after the first raid, the same exhausted force struck again. This time at Tembu, a secondary ZANLA base over 200 kilometers further north in Mozambique's Tete province. The same 88 SAS troopers, the same battered air component, executed a second airborne assault against a base they had been told to expect would hold 2,000 fighters. When the smoke cleared from Tembu on the evening of November 25th, the combined casualty figures from Operation Dingo would become a subject of historical dispute that has never been fully resolved. Rhodesian official records claimed 1,184 ZANLA killed and several hundred more wounded at Chimoio alone. ZANLA's own internal records, later released after Zimbabwean independence, acknowledged losses of approximately 2,000 killed across both raids, though they disputed the breakdown between combatants and trainees. Independent estimates from researchers, including Professor JRT, would place the true figure between 2,000 and 3,000 dead. Rhodesian losses across the entire operation: 2 killed in action, 6 wounded. 1 aircraft lost, a Vampire flown by Lieutenant Phil Haig, hit by ground fire over Tembu. The pilot recovered alive. The strategic consequences were immediate. ZANLA's offensive capability inside Rhodesia collapsed for the first half of 1978. Recruitment slowed. Training pipelines were broken. Tongagara was forced to disperse the surviving forces into smaller, less efficient camps spread across a wider area of Mozambique. Captured documents enabled the Rhodesian Special Branch to roll up entire networks inside the country. But here is the part the textbooks rarely acknowledge. Operation Dingo did not win the war. It could not win the war. By 1979, ZANLA had rebuilt. The political reality that had created the insurgency, minority rule over a majority population, remained unchanged. The Lancaster House Agreement of December 1979 ended the conflict not through Rhodesian military victory, but through political settlement. Robert Mugabe, the political head of the organization whose military arm had been shattered at Chimoio, became Prime Minister of Zimbabwe in April 1980. The doctrinal legacy, however, endured. Operation Dingo became required study at the British Special Air Service training establishment in Hereford, at the United States Army Special Forces School at Fort Bragg, and at the Israeli Paratroop Command. The four-man stick assault doctrine pioneered by Robinson at Chimoio was adopted, in modified form, by counterinsurgency forces from Colombia to Sri Lanka. The combined airborne helicopter assault model became the template for raids ranging from the Israeli operation at Entebbe in 1976, which had actually preceded Dingo, to American operations in Panama in 1989. 88 men, 4,000 enemy, one morning parade. The math that did not work worked. CTA 1213 Min. If you appreciate the kind of military history that goes beyond Wikipedia and into the actual orders, the actual radio logs, and the actual men who pulled the triggers, subscribe and hit the bell icon. New battle every Wednesday. Drop in the comments. Was Operation Dingo a tactical masterpiece, or was it the proof that even a perfect raid cannot win an unwinnable war? I read every comment on this channel. Outro 1315 Min. The lasting lesson of Chimoio is not about superior training, though the SAS were unmatched. It is not about air power, though Norman Walsh's coordination was the most flawless in the history of African warfare. The lesson is about timing. Brian Robinson understood that the morning parade was not just a target. It was a 90-second window in which an entire enemy army would stand still in the open. Find the moment when your enemy is most predictable, most concentrated, most exposed, and the math of the battlefield bends to whoever arrives first. The men of C Squadron carried that lesson home. Many of them carried it across borders again, into operations at Mapai, at Nyadzonia, at New Chimoio in 1979. Some never came home. The names on the SAS Roll of Honor at the squadron's old headquarters in Salisbury, now Harare, include troopers who survived 4,000 enemy at Chimoio and died to a single bullet in a clearing in Tet province a year later. If this one hit, my video on the Sela Scouts raid at Nyadzonia, where 84 men killed an estimated 1,028 in a single hour using captured Land Rovers and a Mozambican uniform deception, will blow your mind. That story is even darker. That story is even shorter. And the man who led it would later command the same SAS that walked into Chimoio. The next chapter is already waiting for you. On November 23, 1977, Lieutenant Colonel Brian Robinson led 88 troopers of C Squadron, Rhodesian Special Air Service, against the largest guerrilla base in southern Africa. ZANLA headquarters complex at Chimoio in Mozambique held an estimated 4,000 armed fighters under the command of Josiah Tongagara, with Robert Mugabe as political head. Supported by Major Brian Snyman's Rhodesian Light Infantry, the air coordination of Group Captain Norman Walsh, and the entire combat strength of the Rhodesian Air Force, the assault force attacked at a numerical disadvantage of more than 20-1. Operation Dingo would become the largest cross-border raid in the Rhodesian Bush War, and one of the most studied airborne helicopter operations in modern military history. In this video, we examine the intelligence preparation by the Sela Scouts, the four-man stick assault doctrine that broke ZANLA's defense, the role of the Canberra bombers and Alawet gunships, and the long-term strategic consequences that shaped Zimbabwean independence. 00, 00 the impossible target 03, 00 the morning parade 06, 00 the burning city 09, 00 the aftermath that rewrote the war 12, 00 subscribe for weekly military history 13, 00 lasting legacy and next battle.